That's the live intro.
I like it.
No segue at all. Just
That's
just arpeggiated keys, and then we're here.
it works.
I'm back from the West Coast, so I put on a hoodie and neglected to shave.
I was going to ask how it went. What were you doing there, by the way?
Secret stuff, startup stuff. Not for my own. I don't have a startup. I'm not going to have a startup. I'm sick of that. Somebody wanted to make an automation business, and I was there as the factory know-how in a room of investors and one other somewhat factory know-how person. And I think the big takeaway is everybody's got this idea. I've heard this idea over and over and over and over again, and I've never seen anybody make it work, but I've seen a lot of people try it. Take some kind of established thing, whatever, like pick a thing, grocery stores, farming, package delivery. Identify and accurately identify a problem and say, well, we're, so-and-so thing is wrong. Grocery stores take too long, or in the case of factories, it tends to be the factory equipment is too hard to use. So we're gonna buy the right set of software tools that make it easy, because now we have, take your pick, digital twins, generative AI.
You mentioned the dreaded two words.
So pick the words, and then drill it down into a specific company's product and say, well, now that thing that used to be really hard, it's going to be easy. And it'd be like, so running a coal-fired power plant used to be so hard, but now we have TerrySoft, so it's going to be a breeze. So the new company is going to come in here, and we're going to use TerrySoft, and we'll squeeze the efficiencies out right away using TerrySoft. And every single time, like, the company raises money, they start trying to sell the new version of coal-fired power plants, and it turns out that TerrySoft basically doesn't work.
It does in a test lab. It does on a babied setup somewhere, but it doesn't in scale.
Well, and working is different when you're talking about working to be used all the time. Most I think that assuming that most companies are just waiting for something to come in and make them better at everything they're doing misses how most companies operate. You and I do not have strong opinions of the average, corporate leadership, or even like the day-to-day drones. However, on average, most people are not just going to work doing a horrible job on purpose every day, waiting for somebody else to come in and make it better. There's a reason that they're doing it the way they are.
Nor, and probably more important, are said group of people interested in someone else coming in to sell them something to show them how bad they've been doing things. I just met with a startup founder Thursday last week, 2 days ago. And he was explaining large, major global industrial company that they were doing work with, trying to. And the sole data scientist, there are like three, but the senior data scientist for said company said, I like your platform. And, this platform has been built by a team of Stanford, MIT, NYU, like really smart people, but we're just going to build it ourselves. Anyway, that's the interesting point that you raise, is it's not just about solving problems, although that should be. It is also, there's how receptive is the audience for the problem that you're solving. And
I'd like to see
Go ahead.
I'd like to see more listening on all sides,
for sure,
and less just less talking, more listening. Listen to your customer, listen to your user, listen to your customer's boss, listen to your competitors. And I feel like for any particular person, You'll go a lot farther that way.
I think the point that I was trying to make is there are ancillary issues besides product solution fit that factor into whether or not a solution is adopted by a company.
Yeah. Well, now we're going to talk about companies,
Com-
some of which are doing cool things, some of which are doing effective things, some of whom will stay in business.
yeah.
Those may not all overlap.
So, what are we calling this? We need to leave the next 2 minutes with a name.
What were the bad ideas I had before? New and noteworthy.
Movers and shakers.
Movers and shakers. I like that. I like movers. I still like movers and
I,
shakers.
I kind
Actually,
of I kind of like movers and shakers. I'm
can we
not
just
gonna
call it
lie.
shakers and movers, just to be just to be cantankerous?
Shaking and moving.
Shaking and moving. Yeah, I like shaking and moving. Now it's more of an ode to movers and shakers instead of just a straight up copying an existing term.
Shaking and it's got a jazz feel too.
Yeah, and I'll get a shaker sound effect now that I'm doing sound effects on the fly. I have a shaker. It's just not within arm's reach at this exact second. I have several shakers, maracas, bells, the little things that go on the ends of your fingers. Clavicles, is that what those are called? I don't have a clavichord. Yeah,
I
that's a
have
clavicle.
I
You have
have
a
a
pair of
clavicle.
clavicles. Do you have any? Do you have any shaker? Do you have any shakers and movers?
I like the sound if it's buried in a recording. I have too many visuals of hippies and festivals banging on bongas, and like percussion is the thing that everybody does at hippie shows, and I don't
Oh, I
care for
just
that.
meant, do you have any companies that are doing interesting things?
Oh, I thought you were asking me if I if I was gonna pull out instruments like Rusted Root style.
This
No,
is obviously an indication that this is the perfect name because it created such confusion. So let's go with it.
shaking and moving.
Yeah,
Uh,
shaking and moving.
Company number one for me is a company called Elicit, Elicit, and I like them. They solve an existing problem, but it's a roadmap for how to use generative moving forward. Um, they have an engineer that I'd like for us to try to get on. But anyway, Elicit is a generative company that summarizes complex research papers. So it's as most scalable AI solutions are, they're augments. So it's an augment like a research assistant. So you can have this agent review, choose your number, quantities of research papers on a topic that you're researching, and do a lot of the citation work for you and summarize those texts. So I think two things for me that I think is interesting. Obviously, the technology, but second is the means that, and this is a common theme over and over with generative, the means for finding new and novel tangents of research by summarizing existing strains of research, I think is unique. So the company is founded by, I forget the gentleman's name, but he's an MIT PhD. Um, anyway, cool company, Elicit, Elicit.
I find excuse me, I find papers that are doing that are doing a survey of existing research helpful. We talked about academic research and how to dig through it as a regular person not too long ago, and I think that a paper, there's a whole class of papers which is, this is a paper that is reviewing other papers, and those are helpful, but also probably not required to have a person do them, or at least not required to have a person do the vast majority of a literature review that is then a paper that is a survey. You are now at a meta paper, which is really just saying, here are a bunch of widely cited papers. Here's the first sentence of the abstract of that paper. And if the papers are badly written, here's our interpretation of the abstract to make it clearer. And the types of things that are reported in these survey papers are, there are this many citations of that paper. There are this many papers that have these keywords. There are that many papers that have those keywords. So it's a very, human presenting metadata type of class of paper. So I like this. I like this concept that Elicit's in.
So it's that. I totally agree. Meta-analyses take on potentially maybe new proficiencies, but it's also if I'm trying to make my way as a researcher, I can leverage a technology like this or this specific technology to find where are the holes, and maybe that's known, but I think I think it's potentially a tool to help guide research into areas where it may be a well-known topic or a subject that has a considerable amount of research, but a specific area or specific tangent within that subject that's lacking. So I like the team. The co-founder and CEO is a gentleman named Andreas Stuhlmuller, cognitive science PhD from MIT.
Nice.
Cool company.
I have a leftover. I have a leftover company doing interesting things. This is from last
No,
time.
ho. You have a leftover company shaking
Sorry,
and
I have a
moving.
leftover shaker. A leftover shaking and moving shaker and mover. This is the company's called Formant, Formant, and they are a robotics company. Except what they do in the robotics space is they have four primary lines of business. They do fleet management. They do telematics and monitoring and data collection. They do teleoperation, so remote operation of your existing fleet of robots. And I can't remember the fourth one that was on their list, but they basically are, if you have robots that you're already using, or if you are buying a bunch of new robots, the things that you will use that are the contemporary software package that allows you to support that robot in operation. Not necessarily just, can I program the robot, but how do I actually use this robot in a way that is extended beyond just XYZ programming of the robot arm or of the AGV or something like that. So I like that it's a platform. I like that it's in robotics. I like the teleoperation piece of it. I like that the company could easily pivot into one or another of these specific pieces. And I like I just like, I was on this last time. I really like the idea of tooling, platform, middleware going into industrial spaces.
I do too, conceptually. What problem does this solve?
Uh, it solves the problem of, I don't know. I don't know.
So it looks like to me, tell me if I'm wrong, but it looks like to me that, and this is why I'm curious. These types of companies, if it's an aggregator of, if I have four different vendors of robots or automated systems, autonomous systems in my production environment, it looks like this is the type of aggregate software that would allow me to control all of them. And so the question comes to me, and I may have it wrong. That's why I'm asking. The question, though, is how do they get exposed data points from those companies? Because that is a real problem, and not just in robotics, but across automation or autonomous systems.
Yeah, so two pieces to that. So first of all, I got it wrong. They have three pieces, not four pieces. They're doing deployment, scaling, and management of fleets. So it's teleoperation, device metrics, and APIs and SDKs. That's the pieces. So the thing about layering on top, the headache and the trouble of how do you get the information out. We talked about Ready Robotics and going to individual companies and basically making deals. One of the things about what Formant has is they can do teleoperation and fleet management, those two pieces, and reporting, those three pieces. They can do those with pretty minimal data and existing APIs out of their robots. So they tend to be more focused on AGVs and less on factory robots. partly because there's a larger volume of them, partly because it's easier to connect to them and pull the data off. But essentially, you can handle that as a middleware or as a platform and management tool with less data. So you minimize the data collection problem by maximizing the value of the few pieces of data that you can easily get. And I think that the other side of it is uh, kind of looking at parallels with how would I deploy a bunch of cell phones to my company, or this is a little bit of an outdated example, but how would you manage a fleet of printers in a series of office buildings? So I see it as a solved problem in other domains that simply doesn't have anybody working on it for the most part in the robotics domain. So the way I see it going for the company is that they will either be successful but remain limited by the fact that robots is only so big a market, or they will be successful, get rolled into, either individual robot vendors will have the same basic capability offered by this company, or there will be generalized IT services that are being sold to factories, and that will include, yeah, okay, so you need to deploy a cell phone, you need to deploy a laptop, you need to deploy a printer, and you need to deploy a robot, and those things will be treated as more similar than dissimilar. And today they're treated as very, very dissimilar. And I think imaginary number of years in the future, they'll be treated as more or less the same thing.
Company number 2 for me.
Number 2.
Numero dos. You have to pull this up. This to me is fascinating. This company has existed since 2016. It's a Boston Dynamics, it's a robotics company. It's called Asteroid Mining Corporation. It's a UK company. They have a six-legged robot for mining asteroids or mining the moon. And I think this is fascinating for two reasons. One is the technology, obviously. Now, whether they can get this to work or not is TBD. They've been at it for a while. They did just get a new round of funding, I think. But the second is, would it or would it not solve a bunch of geopolitical issues if resources were more plentiful based on the ability to extract them from things not in our world? And I think the answer to that is yes, obviously. So I think there are humanity defining capabilities from something like this, and I think the technology is cool. So it's again, feels like to me a lot of this is conceptually very cool, but really, really hard to execute. Not that it can't be done, but I think it's an awesome idea and a neat company.
Are you pro space or anti space?
Pro space, of course.
You could be anti space.
Who could be? I mean, I'm anti space movies, but I like. Why not? Why not? In terms of populating or inhabitation of potentially other livable areas. That's neat. Obviously, SpaceX is focused on that. I think this concept, though, is fantastic. I think this, I feel like personally, not a value judgment, just an objective assessment, that a lot of geopolitical tensions are about resources, as they should be, and or as is logical. And I think this would maybe be would help relieve that bottleneck to the extent that the actual resource allocation can be relieved.
I love
So
space. I'm majorly pro space,
for sure.
but practically speaking, I feel like a lot of the stuff that we talk about as being solved by space is either, well, there's no other way to put it than to say when you talk about how space is going to solve big humanity, when you talk about the fact that space is going to solve humanity's big problems, the ways that we address that are moonshots, right?
Yeah.
So huge ideas and huge payoffs, but a lot of it depends on things like, well, what if we discover that on asteroids there are reserves of things we never knew, like we never knew of, or that we never knew we had any other access to, and that's the only way to get them. And all of a sudden we have, I don't know, quantum gold, and we can run all of, we have the next coal-fired power plant that's transforming humanity because we discovered quantum gold on the asteroids. And this is a very science fiction-y perspective. So I think if you look at huge effort and potentially unlimited return, because you have literally no idea what we could find in space, then that look, we're into space because we like to imagine and stare up at the stars. Now, if you're a pragmatist and you say, still no cure for cancer, we've still barely explored the oceans, we still can't live in a pod on the North Pole. I mean, can't we? Can't, like, why space? Why can't we do it here? And
Yeah.
then I feel like the best answer to that type of naysaying is, yeah, but it's space. Think
Well, I
about
think,
what could be there.
yeah, more from my companies on the cancer front coming up.
Is it
That's
time for my number two?
Yeah, that was a nice tease, wasn't it?
When you say coming up, you mean it's on your list of companies?
It's on my list of companies.
Okay, my second one relates to ocean exploration.
Oh, cool.
This is a company called Pliant Energy Systems, I think. Pliant something, but they have a robot called Velox, Velox, and this robot moves with an efficient undulating propulsion system, which just means that instead of having wheels or a propeller or something like that, it has stingray or skate like wings along the side, and they go like this, and they propel forward by the wavy motion of the wings. And that it's I think semi-rigid, so it propels through water or across land or ice using its wavy motion. And I like this one. I like this one. It's not a new robot, but I like the biomimicry angle, and I like that the types of stuff that was science fiction-y things when I was growing up as a kid continue to be worked on. And I like that it might not work. There may not be product market fit, and there may not be a market, but we went out there, dang it, and we made a we made a robot with wave motion. So yeah, my number two is Pliant.
So it's a rescue. Applications are ice rescue robot, personal propulsion for professional divers and recreational use, standalone thruster to replace propellers on craft in tough environments. Okay.
I hate all those, but I like watching it wave.
So
You know what I'm saying?
you like the company because it's a neat technology.
Yeah, and if we're talking about moving and shaking, I'm anytime we're talking about early or even middle stage startups, I'm so pessimistic that these companies are gonna
Yeah.
arrive. If what we were talking about was somebody that was it was a new platform for buying Bitcoin, I'd be like, well, first of all, there's 400 of them. Probably 10 of them will succeed. The other 390 will fail, and all of them are boring, but some of them will succeed. Great.
Well, I like that they have an energy angle to looks like similar technology where they propose capturing energy in bodies of water, potentially scalable to megawatts. That's interesting.
Right. So that's basically, how do you get a motor which makes rotating motion translate into wavy motion efficiently, and then what are the things that you can do in water with the motor to wave? and wave to motor, because you reverse that and you have a generator, and one way it's propulsion, the other way it's generation. And all of this is just sort of has enough stuff changed now that spinny propeller is no longer the way to do it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Cool. Number 3, numero tres. And we just talked about this. Tempest Therapeutics, Tempest, and they were in the news recently. Maybe even like the end of this past week, yesterday, whatever.
Yesterday, yeah, big
Yeah,
ones.
yeah, and it's because of potentially some performance issues of one of their therapeutics in conjunction with a Roche developed therapeutic. Um, and I'm not sure on what the specifics of that are, but this company's interesting. That entire scenario is interesting as well. But basically, and we're not, neither of us are degreed in this, so we're not going to sit here and discuss the mechanisms and the pathways and the specific therapeutics. But basically, they have developed some unique inhibitors that are potentially really perform really well on certain mechanisms of tumors and functionalities of cancer. So, I mean, without sounding like a fool trying to say things that we're not qualified to talk about, that's it. I think the company's interesting. I think they're focused on. I get the sense, and obviously they're not a huge company, but I get the sense that the science is the focal point of the company and the problem solving. Not that it's not for other therapeutics, but they make it a point to talk about that. So I think this is an interesting company. Obviously, they've had some good news the past few days, but it looks like, and the reason obviously it's that I find them interesting is, like you just said, we haven't made a huge dent in cancer treatment. Some have, some we have, but I think this is potentially, to my limited knowledge, potentially a novel treatment in at least a couple of instances. So I think the company's neat.
It's a good point about companies that are focused on the science as well. I mean, we talked about where research comes from, and I don't know, we marveled at the lack of large government labs and large private labs in the Bell Labs model. And it's not like there's one place you can point, but it's always good to see another company that is clearly doing the science. And I think both Pliant and Tempest in this case are focused on doing the science.
Yeah, but this for me is also a parallel thought experiment, because I think we're conditioned to look for external treatments for the chronic illnesses that we have, that some large percentage of are managed by lifestyle. Obviously, there's a genetic component, but I think there are a lot of illnesses of poor health, chronic poor health, mostly diabetes and cardiovascular, but I think there are certain cancers too. So for me, it's a parallel thought experiment. What would the benefit be for some meaningful, lifestyle modification, therapeutics, preventative, and just to be blunt, like, I think we can do a lot. There's a lot of low hanging fruit with diet, exercise, sleep, stress management, those types of things. But
Are you a Fitbit fan?
I do not own a Fitbit. I have an Apple Watch. The only thing I use it for is my run, or for my
If I
runs.
were going to go back in time to, I don't know, the late 1900s when Fitbit became big. I don't know when Fitbit hit the scene. I would past life Terry from Fitbit day one. Would you have been trotting out Fitbit as a shaker and mover for the for the advantages to lifestyle and the nudges to habits and health.
Sure. Sure.
I've also never had a Fitbit. I tracked
To,
my sleep for a while.
Today's version of that is a Whoop, I guess.
Yeah, the people love that.
Yeah.
Are you a Whoop
I'm
lover
not. No,
user?
here's what I do, and I think this is like a new frontier, an emerging frontier. Um, Not that I'm in any way, shape, or form saying that I'm on responsible for that. I'm partaking of other folks' sort of guidance on this, but I just do a lot of hard stuff. I just make myself do a lot of hard stuff, but I'm consistently taking labs to measure levels of things. So I think the best, and I think this is all going to be intertwined at some point. Like your Whoop will be integrated with your labs from your doctor, your sleep. Like it's not long, and there are companies that are doing this now. Obviously, the consumers of this are wealthier, hyper vigilant people, maybe professional athletes. But I think the more the cost is driven down on this type of thing, it's going to be more ubiquitous. But there are comprehensive monitoring and sort of biomarker schemes that I think make a lot of sense. And labs are a huge thing. Like there's no reason. I think it was Peter Attia, and he's a great follow, by the way, if you've never heard of him, Attia. He's a doctor, and he's pushed a little heavy, but we need this. But he made the point, and I fully agree with this. There's no reason, especially like colon cancer or other things. There's no reason to have these illnesses be fatal. There's no reason. Like if a person's diligent with labs and measuring biomarkers, like measuring, levels of magnesium, and if you're diligent with labs and measuring your A1C and some of the big critical things that impact health negatively long term, and then can take the proper correction course based on the outcome, there's no reason to die from these things. There just isn't. And that's harsh for me to say it that way. But there are too many tests and too many ways to stay on top of these things. I think hopefully it becomes more commercial, it becomes more app-like, so it's more consumable for more people.
I will say that the basics of get an annual physical regardless of how you feel, have lab work done, and discuss it with your doctor directly seems like it would resolve a lot of things. And it also seems like there are companies that are trying to turn that into a retail thing that make it not feel like getting medical treatment, at least here in the States.
That's a friction point, I think. What you mentioned is the connotations associated with this type of thing, making it more consumer-like, I think will reduce the friction for some of these people. But the other is a lot of people, again, not a value assessment or a value judgment, just an assessment. A lot of people know they're unhealthy, and they don't want to come face to face with that. And
or they like the way their life is now and they're fine with it.
Yeah, exactly. But the point is, I think we've all, and I've been fortunate, surprisingly. Like I haven't had a lot of this in my immediate circle, but I think a lot of folks, the numbers bear this out. A lot of folks have been impacted by the passing of a loved one or a significant person in their life with cancer or one of these big diseases, and it's at the point where the burden. There are too many tools available now. Through the the prism of individual responsibility, there are too many ways to stay on top of this and to impact it preventatively, that we shouldn't need as much of a Hail Mary from a cure as we do. And that's the sort of parallel thought experiment for me.
Two good examples of this: diabetes and skin cancer. I had a good friend who was a emergency room doctor for a while, and then worked at a VA hospital after that. And there were very, very preventable serious complications and death due to poorly managed diabetes. And while diabetes historically is a death sentence, it's been something that you can handle with insulin and proper care for quite a while now. And the people that were dying from poorly managed diabetes or have losing fingers, toes, and limbs, they were the issue was not being able to apply the known management fix for a whole host of different reasons. But those are things that don't need treatment. They need management of a known condition with a known course of management. So that was one. And the other one is skin cancer is extremely well known, and if you get screened regularly, and if you wear sunscreen, and if you're like if your dermatologist tells you that you have the risk factors, then that has an impact on what your exposure ought to be. And generally, if you're going to the dermatologist periodically, many forms of skin cancer are completely treatable when caught early, and are simply not caught in time because people don't go and get it checked out. Prostate cancer obviously falls into that one as well, but that's kind of talked about pretty widely as old dudes who don't want to have stuff in their butt ending up getting much too late diagnoses of prostate cancer.
Same thing with colon cancer. There are a couple, obviously the colonoscopy, which is pretty invasive, but there are tests this side of that can also check in for earlier ages, that can check for that. So I think it's twofold. You're right. There are screening and management protocols that, if followed, can prolong the ability of an individual to live with one of those diseases. But then there's also the preventative side, where if a person has the discipline to manage these things preventatively and act accordingly, that's the operative part, based on things that you find. Like there's the preventative piece, which is truly preventative, and then there's catching things early and managing those with discipline. And again, I think if a person wants to mitigate risks from these chronic illnesses, there are a million tools to do that today.
I'm going to put a pin in this topic and save it for a later date.
For sure.
But hold on. I basically don't believe in discipline. So marinate on that. Let's not dig into it. Let's finish our companies. But I basically don't believe in discipline.
I know that's not true.
It is. It's totally true. I mean, there's nuance to it, and I don't think that we're that far apart here. But let's talk about discipline.
The salacious tease.
The salacious tease. Terry is disciplined. Russ is criticizing Terry's existence by refusing to believe in discipline. You heard it here first. These guys are gonna fight.
Oh, discipline is I'm interested in that discussion. Have you done 3 or have you only done 2?
I'm on 2.
So your number 3 is up.
Yeah. Okay. So, all right. So number 3 is also a follow-on from the research conversation. My number 3 here is Autodesk, which is kind of a boring pick. This is a huge, I think they're Fortune 500. They might be higher on the list than Fortune 500, but I think they're gigantic. They're a huge company. They'd make CAD modeling for buildings and for mechanical design things. But the reason they're on the list today is for doing not basic scientific research, but for doing applied research through a series of partnerships and laboratories, and having an Autodesk research division. And Autodesk research has been alive and well and thriving for a long time. So if you spend a lot of time, a bunch of times in a row, trying to pick apart, is Autodesk's research arm effective and working and efficient, some of the bloom may come off the rose. But when you spend a while not engaging with Autodesk research, and then you get back to Autodesk research, you get to get just like a shot in the arm of, here's a cool piece of research that's clearly applied. It's clearly working. It's clearly impactful and meaningful. And the project that I saw while I was in San Francisco at the Pier 9 lab was it was in use data collection for the sake of product design. So what this means is, you know, if I built a guitar based on how it looked and how heavy it would be, that's, you know, visuals and, you know, physical characteristics like the weight. But if I wanted to, you know, measure the tone of the guitar somehow, and I'm taking the as played tone or the speed of fingers or something like that, like measuring how fast the fingers are going, and then feeding that back to my guitar design, that that loop of collect the information on the thing in process and then feed that into the design and build process, rather than just use assumptions about physics or models of physics or models of you know, kinematics and how things interact when they move. Like all that stuff is, it's one more layer in the modeling puzzle. So the particular product that this was being used for was a big old drone, big quad rotor drone, probably, you know, 8 feet across, you know, like angle wise wingspan, 300-pound payload capacity. And it was mostly made of carbon fiber laid up by hand. And inside the carbon fiber, there were sensors, basically in the carbon fiber assembly when the carbon fiber is laid up. This is the same way it's done for Formula One, America's Cup sailing, and NASCAR, right? So that sensor data then feeds back, and basically there's this one part that was just this big giant prismatic, you know, it was basically a rectangle essentially, and that was the arm. After collecting the flight data from a flight test of this thing, and deciding to prioritize a particular dimensional stiffness, that design adjusted significantly, and it went from being, you know, big arm rectangle thing to being a, you know, basically a more of a 4 point joined complex curve of a joint to mount the motor. And that the drone piece was the eye-catching one, and that's a lot of what big dollar research is let me have a big showpiece. But then the actual underlying technology is that feedback loop. And I think that the seriousness of the researchers, it goes up because they have good funding, because they're underneath that Autodesk research umbrella. So, you know, over a long period of time, any big old company like that has all sorts of warts and things that make it maybe not feel as exciting as a startup. But the research is getting done, the applications are going into actual product, the product team is talking to the research team, the research team still exists, and it's not, you know, the research isn't stuck in a laboratory where it's never going to see the light of day. It's going into software and going to get used by people to build stuff. Autodesk, just a small little company for my number three.
Well, I mean, all of these don't have to be startups. I like
Good,
having.
because I think I've only had like a 50% startup rate so far.
Well, I think your experience having worked in a startup has clouded your has made the rose colored glasses that I see through a little less rosy for you.
I'm just a cynical person.
I don't think so. I don't think so. I think you lack discipline, but I don't think you're a cynical person.
I don't think you have to think that. I think we can. Maybe that should be the angle. Can we objectively identify my lack of discipline? That'll be the question. What's
Yeah.
your number four?
Cohere. Have you heard of Cohere? That's the first question.
No,
Don't.
no,
Okay.
I haven't heard
So
of them.
they are a LLM competitor to Anthropic and GPT and Llama and Bard. And they are the least known of the group. They're founded in Toronto. Strong team. I think why I like them, I think the other companies, to me, this is my personal opinion, are more commercially bent, although they can be leveraged for enterprise, obviously. But I think Cohere, at least my read from it, obviously I don't have contacts with anyone in the company, but my read from it is that Cohere has come out of the gate having focused on solving commercial applications, and I think that is what distinguishes them. They have, I think it's called Command, their model. Let me see. Yeah, their Command model, which is their Chat GPT or their foundational model, um, is high performing. I think there are use cases that they're targeting in commercial applications that are unique, still have to be engineered, still have to be trained on native or fine tuned on native data, but they're also focused on that. So it's a real strong team, and a neat technology. And obviously, they've gotten a lot of funding from the the big compute players. So I think they're to be taken seriously. Really cool company from my perspective.
Who are the big compute players?
NVIDIA. Nvidia is the one that comes to mind. There are two or three. I think Amazon maybe has invested, but I know Nvidia has. Um, Maybe AMD. I'd have to go look. Actually, just give me 1 second, and I'll see if I can find it.
I have a Terry's choice coming up for my next one.
Okay,
And the,
Oracle. Oracle is
Oracle. Okay,
another.
yeah.
Yeah, here we go. Oracle and Nvidia are the two big ones. So obviously they're not like, you know, just crawling out of the research closet. They've got they've got some big players. So Oracle, Nvidia, Deutsche Telekom, which is Salesforce Ventures, so Salesforce, Schroders Capital, Tom Best. I mean, a lot of they've raised. Looks like 500 million, and this is as of July, so I'm sure it's no, yeah, I'm sure it's more than that now. Anyway, cool company.
All right, so you have to make a pick. You
Okay.
need to pick. You need to pick. Do you want uh
Which shaker, which mover?
do you want a Hollywood company or do you want a space company?
Well, we've already had a space company, so let's hear what Hollywood's got.
Okay. There's a good seg too. So I just learned this. The co-founder of Formant, who I brought up as one of my earlier ones, previously had a company called Bot and Dolly. Bot and Dolly's claim to fame and product lineup was uh, programming and integrating industrial robots for film. This, it's funny. The demos of things like camera on a robot being waved around to make a cool shot, or person on robot being filmed with a stationary camera, or both operating together. This stuff pops up on YouTube or whatever your feed of choice may be, and every single time it gets the same round of comments. It's, oh well, is that safe? And oh, there goes the camera man. And wow, this is amazing. What are we going to think of next? And people kind of blue sky thinking about, well, if the robots are controlling the cameras and the people, then pretty soon they'll be doing everything. And it's important to point out that the tech to have a camera mounted on a robot, like pick your type of robot. It could be an industrial arm, it could be an automated vehicle, it could be a track that is programmed to move automatically but is otherwise stationary, and you might not call that a robot per se. This technology goes back to the earliest days of robotics. So if you trace robotics as we know it back to the mid to late 70s for commercial applications, people have been putting cameras on this stuff for as long as there's been robots. And it's the same as if talking about aerial photography. From the first time there was a camera, somebody stuck it on a balloon and sent it up in the air, right? So the blend of camera and robot, I think by itself is a really underappreciated blend of technology. And it also is a very thought-provoking blend of technology, because if it wows people every time it shows up, and it's been wowing people for 30 years or more, why is the stuff that the people were wowed by, like, why isn't it going further or doing more? And so I think it's extremely thought provoking. And the company I have on my list is not bought and dollar. They've been purchased and don't operate anymore. The company I have in mind is called The Garage. And The Garage is basically one cinematographer or director of photography who does mostly commercials, and you would immediately recognize some of their work. It's things like the hamburger stacked with bacon and lettuce and tomato has been thrown up in the air and it spreads out, and you see the pieces come back together in slow motion. Or you see a slow motion pour of orange juice and it swirls through a glass and spins up and out with big droplets coming out, and you're thinking, oh, orange juice. Right. So this is the stuff that this company does. And the thing I like about them is it's creative in the sense that the intention is to tell a story with pictures, right? Or with video and sound and audio and lighting and all these things. So it's a very traditional art, but then it's also applying, industrial robotics or programming. Like, you have to be able to make this stuff move. So if it's convenient to use a mechanical thingy, you use a mechanical thing. If it's convenient to use a robot, you use a robot. And so you have all of this blend of camera, motion, tech, and physical. And you also see exactly where this is, where it's going with as robots get cheaper and easier, these shots become more robotic, right? So you see cobots because now I can operate it in the same space that doesn't have to have, you know, shielding to keep people from getting hit in the face with a robot. And then of course there's the last piece of this that I bring it up for, which is because it's 2023, all the behind the scenes of this stuff is now available to anybody who wants to see it. So in addition to releasing the footage, they basically do documentary grade behind the scenes shots of this is how we made it, because the people that are curious might find it, but the average person is never going to accidentally come across how we made this thing. And that's great because all of the people who are curious about how did you do that, now they've got an introduction to, oh, they did it with a robot, or oh, they did it with just a creative, a lever and a swing arm or something like that. So I love all of the pieces of this, and I don't think I don't know how big the company is going to get. I often feel like I wish my life was this guy's job. I don't know that I would feel that way if I was doing it, but just a super interesting little corner of the world that's doing incremental work that every time somebody sees it are like, oh my gosh, this is transformational. Wrong. It's incremental. 3
Yeah.
decades on.
Yeah. Well, neat company. Here's my question. The not actors themselves or actresses, actors or actresses, but that entire ecosystem of humans that are required to make movies, and not the behind the scenes part, the on-screen stuff. So stunt people, body doubles. Is there do you think that's automated robotically in the future? And I don't mean like CGI. I mean like humanoid robots that are stunt doubles or body doubles for the actor. I don't think there will ever be a replacement for actors or actresses. Who knows? But for the ancillary roles, the support roles in a movie.
So number one, absolutely, positively not. A robot has to do a certain thing. So animatronics is not advancing or getting the field that you're talking about. Let me just be clear that I understand. You're talking about, instead of having Terry sitting over there dining in a slight background or being a character that doesn't have any spoken lines, it is a robot version of Terry that looks like Terry.
As a stunt person or as a body double for the actor or actress.
No, it's definitely not going to happen, because animatronics isn't getting cheap fast enough or accessible or lifelike. None of those things are happening fast enough. Number one.
Okay, so the lifelike part is what I was interested in.
Yeah, but number two, that workflow of working with a brand new, thing that is a machine instead of, like, there's no reason a doll can't do it for a lot of stuff. And so dolls might get better, but it's not going to resemble, your Osimo Honda robot, but more like a person. So, and then the other side of it is the consumers of this stuff have accepted CGI fully and completely, like 1,000%. We accept that to our eyeballs when it's on a screen is either indistinguishable to us, or we are suspending disbelief sufficiently that we're okay with that being animated. If it needs to be animated, it needs to be animated. And if you ask the average person what's animated and what's shot in real life, they would not be able to tell you what was shot on a green screen versus what was real. And the trend of shooting literally everything on a green screen with some of a scene in front of it is mostly absent to a typical viewer, because it doesn't look like the 80s anymore, where you have this little halo outline of what's on the background. You have to actually watch the behind the scenes or watch how this was produced. And just like auto tune with music, the people that are making this stuff and want it to look like the characters are walking down the street, like think about a meaningless shot of like you and me walking up to it. We're the stars of the show and we're walking up to a house. There's no reason you can't shoot that on location, but it's not shot on location anymore. It's not even shot on a sound stage. It's shot on a green screen and then animated in afterwards. And that doesn't sit well with people who think that they're watching the thing that they're actually watching. So everybody no, they don't hide it per se. You can find it if you go looking, but most people don't want to know. So they don't go look into it.
Isn't it interesting that I have strong opinions about that in music, but could give two shits in film? Like, I just don't care.
I
I don't have a position. I could care less. It
my
doesn't matter
position
to
my
me.
position is don't make a movie that ruins my suspension of disbelief. And I don't care if it's because you have bad CGI, fine. If it's because you have bad practical effects, okay. If it's because your practical effects are incongruent with the rest of your movie, like it's a very good movie, but then I obviously see a ragdoll flopping through the scene on one scene, that's a problem. Whereas if it's like a Chuck Norris movie and I see ragdolls flying away from an explosion, that doesn't wreck my suspension of disbelief. The whole thing looked like it was set up to be silly and fake anyway, so whatever. It was like
Yeah.
if it's designed to just look over the top, fine.
I guess I don't watch, or I don't watch much of anything film wise anyway, but I guess I don't watch movies where effects are big parts of the story. I watch dialogue movies where the narrative, the conversation is the big part of the story. So I wouldn't know if, I
If you're watching a television show or a movie that was shot by somebody other than Wes Anderson or maybe Christopher Nolan, and it's two people talking like this, or a shot reverse shot where it's going back and forth between who's talking, 98% of that, the background that you're seeing does not exist.
and I wouldn't care.
No, because it doesn't break the immersion in the story. It's just not relevant.
Yeah.
Don't watch. I can. Here's a strong don't watch recommendation. The movie Lyle Crocodile.
I've never heard of it.
Are you aware of the kids' book Lyle Crocodile?
No.
So this kid brings home a crocodile from the zoo, and the crocodile is sort of human, and then it causes all sorts of hijinks in their brownstone and in their neighborhood in New York. And it's basically about what do you do when crocodile, not alligator. What do you do when a crocodile that's quasi humanoid ends up living in your house as a child? Great kids book. There are parts of the movie that are cool to look at. Obviously, Lyle the crocodile is animated, and my God, it's horrible. Just one of the worst movies I've ever seen visually.
I mean, just the sound of it. I think maybe I'd rather have bamboo shoots under my fingernails than to be forced to watch that.
Javier Bardem is in it, and he's great.
Company number 5 for me.
Do it.
I've got to get to this company because they got left off last time.
Okay, do it.
I mentioned them in reference to Sunflower Labs, but it's an AI company in San Francisco called All Turtles, and they build the AI their main office is in San Francisco. It's a globally distributed company, so I like the model of the company, the way they work. I like that they are contract AI developers, so they're building AI for companies that want to build they're basically a production house for AI, and probably never going to be a huge company because that's hard to scale that business model, but they don't care. So I find them interesting. They have a pretty diverse use case portfolio, and obviously I'm a big fan of Sunflower Labs, the drone company that we've talked about a couple of times. So this is the company behind the vision on board Sunflower's autonomous drones. All turtles.
As in turtles all the way down.
The great Sturgill Simpson song, yes.
There's a lot of good stuff about turtles all the way down.
Yeah,
Do you want a left field company for number 5?
yeah, yes.
Okay, so this, I don't know if this is in the correct spirit of the exercise. My last
I
company.
was going to say Autodesk,
I was in San Francisco, right? So Autodesk came to mind. I really got to say it's Autodesk Research. The team, there was 40 people on the team doing this stress testing stuff, and some of them are Autodesk employees, some of them are independent researchers, but none of them, they're not a company. They are doing research that is hosted by Autodesk and partially supported by Autodesk. So
are they
it's really,
are they contractors?
no, Autodesk Research itself has employees, and they partner with university researchers, and um, they often partner with other companies. But I think in this case, it was all Autodesk Research employees plus academics, and that was the whole team.
They're a big, and I'll talk about this company, and we'll probably have somebody on from them. That they're a, I better not say that. I'll just
Don't
keep
say
that.
it. Don't
Yeah,
say it. So here's my last one. They're a left field San Francisco company, and they're the things that they do in the physical world are not digital at all. They're not a digital company because they're a bakery in San Francisco. This place is called Tartine. It's famous. If you like bread, you know Tartine. I don't like bread. I mean, I love bread, but I don't know anything about baking or the world of bakery. But it turns out that Tartine set the world on fire in 2010 by releasing a book called Tartine Bread, where they basically just published their recipe for bread. I don't know. Bread became more popular. I thank the internet for this. And then, like baking bread at home became more popular. They happened to be catching on to a movement. They ship their bread all over. They're world famous. I'm talking to my baker buddy. I'm giving him like the Tartine notes because the place I was staying happened to be around the corner from Tartine. And I'm like, I had no idea that any of this mattered. And when I walk in here, it's like it's a good bakery, but I had no clue. I'd never been to their website. I sort of kind of knew their name a little bit. Uh, and then I go to their website and I'm like, wait a second. These guys are like, they've got the bakery, but like they've got a whole identity brand online e-commerce. Like they got all this accoutrement around what would otherwise be a really good little corner bakery. And then I'm like, man, companies are doing like all kinds of stuff all the time, and I would have no idea. There could be somebody mining asteroids right now, and I probably wouldn't even know about it.
I had.
This is my reason for bringing up Tartine. It's just I feel like I was you know how you talk about you're watching a different movie. I feel like I was on a different planet from everybody else who's like, oh, Tartine. You know, I get to San Francisco. I get to where I'm staying. My wife doesn't text me to say, hey, how are you? How was the flight? She texts me to say, hey, I looked at your location. You're a block away from Tartine. And I was like, what
So how
is a
much of
Tartine?
that?
What is a Tartine?
How much of that was in your suitcase on the way home?
One loaf. I had only a carry on. I didn't. So I thought they'd ship for less. It's $60 to get 2 loaves shipped here. It was $14 to buy a loaf and put it in my carry on. I should have just left my clothes there and brought more bread.
Is loaf and its plural counterpart the most just disgusting word in our jargon?
No, I'm not
Loaf.
grossed out by it. No, but I'm more of a loafer than most.
I took a loaf home. Loaves. I don't know. Just a
Loaves
weird.
is definitely less nasty than loaf. But I
Yeah.
mean, it all has to do with a very particular connotation. So this is a family show. I don't need
It,
to introduce my kids to this stuff.
it's
If
not
they knew,
just a
I would hear loaf all the time.
it's not just a connotation. It's especially your little mini me. He looks like he would love to learn that word.
We
I'll
we
be
gotta
sh-
go. We gotta go.
I'll be sure he does if I ever get to meet said
Thank you.
youngster.
Thank you. See, this was a good one. We got to 5 companies. 2 of mine were questionable. Give them like a C minus.
No, I so it doesn't have to. The whole thing doesn't have to be meat. I like it. I've never heard of tartine. The male co-founder looks like he's a big craft beer fan. So
Yeah, beer and bread are like next door neighbors.
yeah, I now know of tartine.
And their website is copyright 2021, despite being basically like a huge part of their prestige and renown. But I like it. There's nothing digital in that place. It's just they bake bread. A lot of mechanical stuff, but like nothing's digital.
Biscuits. We like the jagged edges. We like to know that it's handmade and authentic.
It was very handmade and authentic, and I yeah, it was delicious. Don't mail order something, but if you're in San Francisco, I highly recommend checking. You know what? Honestly, check a bakery out. There's a bunch of good ones.
I was sent chocolates by a vendor as a thank you gift for being on a panel. I was sent a big, large chocolate sampler from a chocolatier in San Francisco, and I can't remember the name, one of the famous ones. And it was out of this world. It was
Those people.
fantastic.
We should have an entire episode on San Francisco. It's you could fill many encyclopedias with just San Francisco.
Well, it's taken it on the chin a little bit recently in terms of safety and that sort of thing. But yeah,
I rode in a robotaxi, and we need a week straight of robotaxi debrief. There's my teaser.
yeah. All right.
See you next time for robotaxi talk.
Robo taxis next week.
Bye, Terry.
Take care, man.